Welcome to this episode of Art Safely in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. I am a woman with short hair, blue eyes and glasses, and today I wear a light green top. Behind me is a dance studio with gray walls, tall mirrors, and spotlights. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled artsably.com. Today, Artsably is in conversation with Erman Türkeli, a musician and assistant professor at Bahçeşehir University in Istanbul, Turkey, and the founder of the House of Arts and Science in Istanbul. You can find the resources mentioned by Erman Türkeli during this episode on Artsably's website in the blog section.
Hi, this is Erman. I'm the author of First Steps of a Little Artist. Today I will be talking about the details of the book, how it works, our goal, and what we aim with this book. First of all, I need to mention that it's been 12 years since I have been working on this book. I wanted to make sure that this book will enable all the children in the world to play the piano easily. The most important detail of this book is, instead of using musical notes, we are using symbols for right hand and left hand, as well as the note. So now, instead of trying to find the note on the piano, now we have the circle for the right hand notes and we have the triangle for the left hand notes. Now that we covered the right hand and the left hand with triangle and circles, now we are going to find out how we know what the C, D, E, F is. So instead of C on the piano, now we have the black circle. Instead of D, now we have the yellow circle. And instead of E, now we have the green circle. So if you look at the book very carefully, you will understand that everything is going to be symbolized in this book. So this is going to make it very easy for kids to learn it at their first glance.
Welcome to this new episode of Artsably in Conversation. Today, I am with Erman Türkeli, who is a musician and assistant professor at Bahçeşehir University in Istanbul, in Turkey, and also the founder of the House of Arts and Science in Istanbul. We're going to talk about that. Welcome, Erman.
Welcome to Turkey. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so I always, I'm interested in your work because you're doing a lot of work in teaching, but you're also yourself a teacher. So can you tell us where music started in your life and what you did yourself as a student in music and what you're doing today?
Well, back in the Mediterranean part of Turkey, I was a kid at the age of, I remember all the way down to like 5 years of age, and I loved nothing outside of music. And even still now, I have been a violinist for the last 30 years. I'm still very excited to be a musician, to be a student of music on a daily basis. And so I was in a city called Adana in the Mediterranean part of the country, Turkey, and every semester I would talk to my dad and mom and say that I want to buy a piano. And coming from a middle class family, it's not all that easy to just buy an instrument just because your kid wants to have one, because it's expensive. And so every year they would say, okay, so let's see your grades at the end of the year, and then we will think about that. So there's the first year in elementary school, second year, third year, fourth year, and fifth year. And unfortunately, I never had it. And we moved to a different location in the city, and in the environment, my brother had a friend who was a student at the conservatory at the time, because I never knew what conservatory is at the time. And so we met with him, and one day we went to his house, and I saw this big piano at his house, and I said, "What is this?" Because I have only at that time I had only seen just the keyboard, the digital keyboard, the small one. And he said, "Well, that's the piano. That's the upright piano, and you don't even need to have an electric cable to work this. And this is just an upright piano. It works manually and acoustically." And I said, "Can I just press the buttons?" And I pressed the buttons, and he saw me doing this. And later on, I didn't know that, but he went to my dad and said, "Erman is really interested to play an instrument. So how about I introduce one of my teachers at the conservatory to you, and maybe you can arrange some lessons for Erman." And my father was like, "Yes, of course." And so we went to this teacher's house, and before any instrumental education in Turkey, and unfortunately they still do it, they check your ear, they say, and it is like they push some buttons and they ask you to just imitate the sound of the note that you hear from the piano. And that just never worked for me, because he would say, "Give me the sound of this note," and I didn't understand even what he was talking about. So I was laughing, and he thought I was not able to hear the note. But I was just laughing for the fact that he was asking me to give the note to him, and I didn't understand what he was talking about. So then he explained, but first he explained to my father that I would never be a musician. I don't have the talent. I don't hear the notes. And he said, my father said, "Can we try it again tomorrow?" And so we went there again tomorrow, the next day. And he said, "No, no, no, no. I will not teach him. My wife can teach him." So his wife came, and she did the same thing. And I was laughing again. And she said, "This guy will never become anything in music." And she said, "I will have my daughter teach him." So his daughter, their daughter came in, and they were like, "Erman, I am going to play a note on the piano, and I will imitate it just like a flute with my mouth." And then I understood what she was talking about. She was asking me to imitate the sound of the piano. So then I started doing it. Then she was like, "Mom, Dad, come and see. This guy is actually able to do this." And then later they figure out that actually I have a perfect pitch. But at first it was very funny. They said, there was a very famous sentence that he said. He said, "If this guy enters the conservatory, I will become a shepherd at the conservatory." That was the sentence that the professor said. And then they said, "Okay, well, now you understand how we are doing this." So they started putting multiple voices on the piano, and I was able to divide them and give them back. And so they said, "Okay, now if this guy doesn't win the exam, then I will become a shepherd at the conservatory, because now I have a perfect pitch." And so later on, I entered the exams, the auditions at the conservatory, and I became a conservatory student. And I was actually the first one to enter it. And they asked me 8 notes at the same time. So they basically like pressed down 8 notes, and I was able to identify them. Then I started becoming a conservatory student at the age of 10. And in Turkey, that was the earliest you can start. Now it starts at elementary school. And so I became a student, and I'm still a student of music, and I still have perfect pitch. And so that's what I do. And that's how my music journey started.
But you're a violinist, right? You're not a
I'm a
pianist.
violinist.
Yeah.
At the entrance exam, they decide what instrument you can play based on your finger length, and they check your finger and they see how you can do this. And they said, "Okay, you can choose 2 instruments." And I said, "Okay, either piano or the violin." And I was dying to do the piano, and they said no, you can do the violin because your fingers are not that long for the piano, which is funny. Now my wife is a piano professor and I can actually play the piano. And well, actually at the time probably they had teachers with no students and they wanted to fill up their studio, and so they put me in violin. I'm lucky to be a violinist. I'm married to a pianist. But I'm lucky to be a violinist and we play together now.
So your studies were in Istanbul, but that you didn't stay in Istanbul for your higher education, did you?
No, at first, I started actually in the Mediterranean part of the country, not in Istanbul. And so I did my middle school there, high school there, and the university, the undergraduate there. And from Adana, I flew out to America to do my master's and doctorate. So I did my master's at Pittsburgh State University and my doctorate at Florida State University. And at the age of 26, I heard the same thing. They said, you became the doctor of music. And I said, what is this? I was just making music. So I was very young because I enjoyed what I was doing. So starting with elementary school until finishing up doctorate, I never had a gap year or a gap month. And so at the age of 26, I had my DMA license, Doctor of Music and Arts license from Florida State University. And I think that I'm still a lifetime student of music, and that's what I do.
So how long did you stay in the States?
About 7 years. After that, I had about 3 music teaching studios in Florida and in Alabama, and then I decided to travel back to Turkey. So I moved to this historic, beautiful city of Istanbul. I'm not from Istanbul, but I moved back to Istanbul, and I have been living in Istanbul since then. It's been 12, 13 years since I moved back from States.
So when you came back, did you become a teacher immediately, or what did you do in the?
At first, in America, I was an orchestral player in the symphony orchestras, and I had music teaching studios. So I had a lot of students, private students, and then I was also a member of the orchestras in the violin section. So when I came back, I wanted to have like a 6 months off to see how Istanbul works, how Istanbul lives the day. And so when does the day start in Istanbul? When does it end? And I figured out early enough that Istanbul never ends. Istanbul is a 24-hour city, just like New York. And so then I started teaching some. I never became an orchestral player in Turkey. I'm still not. I do recitals with my wife throughout many countries in Europe and also in Turkey. And now I have 2 different education centers in Istanbul, and I'm also a university teacher at Bahçeşehir University, and where I teach violin and chamber music. But outside of the university, I start teaching at the age of 2 to kids, and also I work in special educations. I work with autistic kids using my methods.
That's at House of Arts, right?
That's the House of Arts and Sciences.
So how did you? What is the story behind the House of Arts and Science?
Well, I couldn't find a job, so I had to find my own. So that was the story actually, because well, I had music teaching studios back in America, and when I came back here, I wanted to do the same here. And at first, I wanted to become a university teacher, but I was so young. I was at the age of 26. Nobody hired me as an assistant professor at that age, and so I started having private students. And later on, I formed my first education center that was named House of Music. Then I wanted to always have science classes and art classes in the same place at a young age. Students would come in and they can do chess and they can do physics and they can do violin and piano and guitar at the same time. So that was the goal, because I believe arts and science should always be together. And so that was the story behind that. So from House of Music, we turned that into House of Arts and Sciences, and at a very historic building in Istanbul, and that's what we still do. We have the second location now. Istanbul has two different sides. One is the Anatolian side, the Asian side, and there's the European side too. So we have one center in the Asian side and one in the European side. So, and that's what we do. But mainly our education centers are now working only in the field of music.
And what made you start working with children with learning disabilities?
Back in US, I had a student one day. One family came and said, "We have a student who is mildly autistic." And well, up until that time, that was probably the first time I heard that term. And I said, "What is autism?" And his mom explained what it is, and he said, and she said he just works, he just learns everything normal, but then he can act different sometimes. And he came into my class, and so I started working with him. But the first class was very interesting. He just, like a shark, he would just travel around me. He would just walk around me as I was telling him how to do this song, how to play this song, and he would stop, play, and then he would start circling again. And after two classes, I called his mom and I said, "It seems like I'm unable to teach him because he is just circling around me, and I feel like he's not listening to me. So it might be better to maybe find a different teacher who knows what this is all about." And she was like, "How about in the third lesson, you ask him what he learned in the first two lessons?" I didn't know that he's a recording machine. So the third lesson came by, and I said, "Hey, can you tell me what I taught you in the first lesson?" He was like, "Yes." For 45 minutes lesson, he talked about the entire class, minute by minute, second by second, with every detail. So I learned that actually he's listening to me as he was circling around me. And so it was quite an experience. And he was a great violinist. He was a great pianist too. And so we had great 2 years together with him, and he would not talk to me too much in the lesson. But he would always listen and do what I tell him to do on the violin. And it was very interesting. And then when I came back here, back in US, I had started working with kids using symbols and colors, not with that autistic kid specifically, but with the early age students. And the reason was, I had a student, I still talk to them, Avery. She was at the age of 10, and she would come into my violin lessons, and she had a sister who was at the age of 3 or 2.5 at the time, Edison. And Edison would be like, at the end of each class that we do with Avery, and Edison would be like, "Can I also play?" And I would be like, "No, you can't play. I can, it's too early." And she would be so devastated. And one day her mom came to me and said, "Erman, can you maybe try with her?" I said, "No, she's too young. She cannot learn the notes." And so I denied that. And later on, she came into my class for about 6 months. I tried very hard to teach her how to read the notes. And the first month she loved the violin. At the end of 6 months, she hated the violin because it's just so difficult to learn with the traditional methods. And slowly, one by one day I was driving on Interstate 10 in Florida, and I said, "How can I do something different to teach her? Because she's unable to understand everything I say." And all of a sudden, as I was driving on I-10, I said, "How about instead of saying the note names, I say colors? Instead of saying C or do in Europe, I say yellow. And instead of the violin strings, I say, instead of saying G, D, A, E strings, how about I say circle?" So I tried. In the next 2 lessons, she learned about 5 songs. So the first 6 months, it was a struggle of nothing. And so we started using symbols and colors to learn, and that later turned into a method that I worked on for about 12 years. I worked on the method before I published the first steps of a little artist book. And so with the book, we work in special education. We teach autistic kids how to play the piano. The first book came out on piano because it's an educational approach. The publication was easier on the piano. Now we are working on the violin book, and the xylophone will come out, and there's the ukulele will come out, and there is going to be a rhythm book for autistic kids and also with the early childhood kids. So we are using symbols and colors to teach the kids. That's how it all started, and that's what we do now.
Okay, and so if we are a little bit more detailed right now, right now, your book, it's really, and you also have an introduction video that will be we will post, we will share with Artibly. But basically, it's about now teaching some teachers to acquire this method so that they can also share this method with their own children.
Well, yeah, we do teach students, and we also teach teachers to show them how they can use this book in their education, especially at the age of 2, 3, and 4. They use the book until 5. With the 5, kids slowly start learning the alphabet. Mm-hmm. And alphabet is also, the letters are also symbols, basically. Mm-hmm. And once they start learning the letters, they can easily learn the notes, in my opinion. So that's what we do. At the age of 5, we do a little transition to learn the notes. But at first, we start with only colors and symbols. So we have colors on the keyboard of the piano. Mm-hmm. So the C is black, and D is yellow, and E is green. So there's orange for the F. So we have the colors on the piano. We have stickers at the end of the book. So we have stickers that they put on the keyboard, and also symbols are identifying our hands. So we have the circle hand and we have the triangle hand, because at the age of 3, who knows what right is, what left is, and it's so difficult. So what we do is we have these kid-friendly markers. So we draw a little circle here and a little triangle here. So now they have the triangle hand and circle hand. So it's a lot easier for them to identify that way. And so what they do is they look at the book and see the symbols, and then they just found that's very same symbol on the keyboard, and they just play the note. And so they can start playing the melodies using this method.
And also the symbols, the notes, the different notes lengths are represented by symbols too, right?
Yeah, the size of the symbol changes. So if it's a little longer note, like a 2-beat long, then the size of the symbol doubles. And if it's a dotted quarter, then it's a different size. So, and they can see this in the book clearly. So we also teach them how to compose with colors.
Oh, that's nice.
That's very important for me. We have composition pages for the kids, because I do believe that it is very, very important to compose an idea. It doesn't have to be a melody. They can compose anything, and that can help in their later life to create something different. So the idea of creation is quite important for me. So what they have is they have symbols without the colors. So we ask them to color them, the symbols, and they can create their own melodies based on the colors that they put on the blank symbols that we provide.
How do you work with the children on that? So they first have to acquire this method first, right? As a player. Yeah. And then you sit with them and you say, now it's your turn, compose a melody. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, we start with just finding the notes on the piano, while the colors and the symbols. And then so the first 26 pages of the piano, we have free fingering. So they can look at the symbol, play the symbol with any finger that they like. Later on, we ask them to have designed fingers. So what we do is C has to be played with the first finger. But what is first finger for a 2 years old? So what we say is, so now you have the circle hand, and now you have the black finger, the yellow finger, that's the D, and there's the green finger, that's the E, there's the F, there's the pinky is being the note G. So with the A and B later on, we ask them to decide on their own, because I like giving children to decide what they want to do. So with two notes, we give them the decision, and they can just play them if they even want with their nose, because that's at the age of 2, we do 20-minute lessons. And so we want to give them the idea of freedom, creating something, and learning something different. That's how we do it. And then when the composition pages come, we give them the markers with the blank circles, and we ask them, what notes do you want to give to this white circle? And they say, okay, this is going to be the green, the note E. And so the other one is going to be the red, the note G. And we have a page, the harmony page, I like to call. I took counterpoint lessons for years and harmony lessons for years, compositions lessons. But we ask them to look at the colorful friends page. What colorful friends page is, you know how in music we have the C, E, G. When you play them together, that's a C major chord. Mm-hmm. So we say these are good friends. So the black and the green and the red, if you put them together, they're going to sound better. And so what they do is, okay, so I have a black note here that I colored, and now it's better to use either green or the red. That's basically a counterpoint class. So then they say, okay, so I will play the green. So now they have the C and E, and when they play together, they sound better. So we ask them to learn the counterpoint in one page.
How does it work? I mean, it works similarly for the other instruments, but something like the xylophone or the ukulele. So one hand is the chord hands and one hand is the
with the
melody
piano
line.
Yeah, with the piano, we have two hands, circle and triangle. With the violin, those symbols are different. With the violin, the strings are the symbols, and the notes are the colors on your finger. With the ukulele, the same thing. The different strings are different symbols, and we draw those symbols on the back side of the bridge on the violin. So when they hold the violin, they see the colors and symbols. So what they do is, okay, so now we have, let's say, the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So they play circle, circle, star, star, and the yellow star, the first finger, and the black star. So that's E, F sharp, E. And instead of saying that, we have circles. And the circles are the things that they start seeing when they are born, the first day. So it's a lot easier for them to identify and understand what it is. With the xylophone, it's just like the piano. So you have the colors for the notes and the symbols for the hands.
Okay, I see. So right now there is one book. There's going to be several different books about this method. And any plans for other projects related to your school or your method?
Yes, we want to work with elderly. Because what happens is, at the age of 2 and 3, the biggest struggle is learning the notes. At the age of 62, 63, it is the same thing, learning the notes. Because with the staff, it's very difficult to identify the G, the E, the F, the A, and then this different sizes, and identify them there, and then find them on the piano or the violin, whatever you play, and then playing one note. Even the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star you have tens of notes. So it is very difficult with the elderly to play an instrument or start an instrument. So what we do is we also teach them with the colors. So at the first class, they start playing the melodies, other than learning the notes for about 6 months, finding them on the keyboard for another 3 months, and then playing one song. So we teach elderly using the book again, but we just change the repertoire. We teach them songs that they like to hear, and we basically apply that system to a regular song. And they also do it, and then now we are working on that on the violin and on the piano, because at a late age it is quite important to use your fingers, use your eyesight, and use your hearing. And if you use this on a daily basis, it is believed that the process of dementia comes back to you way later. It'll come back, but it slows the process of dementia. It doesn't remove the dementia out of your life. I hope one day it will, but it helps elderly to do a different activity.
Am I mistaken, or you also have a project for blind people?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, actually, it is one of the goals in life that I want to do. I'm working on that for about, I don't know, 5-6 years. One day, I went to a museum in Istanbul. That was a museum called Dialogue in the Dark. And in the museum, 9 people become a team, and then they travel with you in a pitch black environment, and they introduce Istanbul to you. This museum, I hear that in about 60 countries they have this museum, and in Turkey, in Istanbul, we have a museum that is here forever, because they sometimes do it like this museum goes to a different country and they stay there for about 2 years, and then another country for 1 year. But in Istanbul, it's for a lifetime. So when I went to that museum, we were traveling in pitch black Istanbul. So they would take you to grocery store, you hop on the ferry, and they basically make you feel like, yes, you don't see it, but you can feel it and you can hear it and you can touch it. So you would go to a grocery store, and they would ask you, find apples and buy 1 kilo of apples. And you'd be like, how? And be like, okay, well, hold the apple and smell it so that you will know that it's an apple. And so it was quite an experience. And when I got out of that museum, our tour guide was a blind person. His name was Engin, and he inspired me very, very much. And I said, "Can I have coffee with you one day?" And he's like, "Yes, of course." He's such a funny guy. And he's like, so one day we had coffee with him, and I said, "What does music mean for a blind person?" And he said, "Well, music is life." And I said, "Okay." And we're going to be friends for a lifetime now, and because music is life for me too. And I started writing a musical journey where all the blind people come into an auditorium. There's a chamber orchestra on stage playing with candles. The auditorium is pitch black dark. Only the musicians see. And they're going to play songs, compositions from 7 different countries. And 2 theater artists will talk about a story that goes through those 7 countries. And each time they travel to a different country in their journey, they talk about like Egypt, and the orchestra starts playing Egyptian composers. And in that auditorium, they're gonna smell something different when the Egypt comes. And when they go to India, the fragrance change in the auditorium, and the songs change in the chamber music orchestra, and the storyline changes also. So that's going to be an experience concert, I like to call. So they will go to the stage, and also people with eyesight can also come in, but they will be blind in the auditorium because it's going to be pitch black. So I want them to close their eyes and be in an auditorium where they won't see anything, but they will listen to the music. They will hear the stories of those 7 countries. they will smell different fragrances of those 7 countries. And hopefully, I'd like to add something else. I want them to also touch something. Like when the story goes to Africa, I want them to find that banana tied somewhere on their chair. I want them to find it on their chair. So I want them to experience something different. And I have been working on this storyline. I'm writing the story, and I'm also finding the compositions for those 7 countries. And hopefully one day we'll be able to do it.
Wow, it's a very interesting project.
Mm-hmm.
The mix of feeling and smelling and all the, all the senses that you can really think of when you don't
Yes.
You don't consider a sight, right? So
that's what I want to do, and that's what I have been working on. I'm almost done with the storyline. So the story starts in 1500s in Istanbul, and goes to Egypt, it goes to India, and it's a fiction story. So it goes to America and listen to jazz, and comes to France and smell different fragrances in the history of Paris. And so we play French music there, and the theater artist will be talking about these stories in a very theatrical way. So there will be different sound examples in the concert. So they will be hearing the birds, and they will be hearing the fairies, they will be hearing the arrows being shot at. So it's a story, and it's going to be an exciting story. So
for sure. Okay, so with all these experiences and projects that you have, with thinking of another way of playing music, or developing accessible ways of performing music, I always have this question that I really like, and it's about accessibility in the arts, or sometimes we talk about visibility culture, because it's really what it is. What does it mean for you to work in an environment where you promote accessibility in the arts?
It means many things, and especially this last project that I'm talking about, the musical journey. When people go to a concert, they experience a music that was composed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But when I go to concerts, I see less and less people that are blind, that are autistic. So in my concerts, in my recitals, there's a rule. If there's an autistic kid, and if the concert hall doesn't let kids with autism, then I'm not going on stage, because art should be accessible for everyone. If I did special concerts for kids with Down syndrome, and some of those concerts were some of the memories I will never forget. And I want all the artists, all the concert artists and musicians and theater artists to experience this. And so that's why accessibility in arts should be worked on even more every day, but I see less and less every day. Unfortunately, in Turkey, in Istanbul, there was a restaurant, for instance. It was the dinner in the dark. That was the concept. And you would only say what you have allergies, your allergies, and then they would serve you food that you would never know what it is. And so, but unfortunately, they closed the restaurant. But I want to be able to promote concerts and give concerts for children, especially who are blind. My wife, we are very lucky that we have a student who is living in a very different part of the country, and we teach her online. She is an incredible pianist. And but if we just say, oh, she's blind, she cannot play the piano, that would be such a loss, because she plays incredible. I will send you videos, and it's incredible. And so therefore, all of these examples tells us that we should be more accessible for everyone, and we should not limit our educations, our teachings in also one area. We shouldn't have an age limit. We shouldn't have a student type limit, in my opinion, and every day we're working on that more.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's the preconceived notion of disability in music being so opposite is so stupid in a way. It is
Very
not.
much so.
So I'm happy to find people from all over the world who are defending this. Let's find a way. You know, like there is no reason for these students not to play music.
That's really nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, Braille himself was a pianist too. And
Yeah.
he has a piano method.
Yes, of course, yes. Braille
We
music,
found the book, and he actually worked on that.
yeah.
Unfortunately, that is not talked about quite as much. We traveled to the different city just because in that city there was a library that we could find the books, and we can find different ways of printing music. And we have all the audiobooks now,
Yep.
and we can also have different printer systems, which we do now. We just need to implement the different music notation software, so that actually we can print out the Beethoven sonata with just a different system, different notation. We can think outside of the box. It's 21st century.
Exactly. And with new technology, I mean, in Art Sibley, there has been a few musicians who identify as blind and who have shown that with the new technologies that are developed today, we can easily use a device and have some guidance or some audio voice system that they're used to. And with that, they can do anything.
My wife teaches every Saturday at 9 a.m. to our little student who is blind, Ipek, and she's incredible. Every Saturday morning is so much fun for us because every day she practices. And every week, my wife gives a different song and plays that different song for her. She records that. And then the following week, it's a concert performance. And it's incredible. And normally, if she goes to a different education center, it would be like, I'm sorry, we can't do this because she cannot see the staff. That's just nonsense now. There's so many different technologies. And most of those people, if they don't see, then they hear better.
And they memorize better.
Yes, and she has a perfect pitch, and she memorizes so many different songs, and they are like pianistic songs now. They're not only kids' songs; they are like pianistic repertoire now. She memorizes, and my wife has another university student, and he's able to see it, but very difficult for him to see anything. So what he does is he takes a photo of the song and then zoom in and memorize everything. And she plays Chopin's and Beethoven sonatas. And you can, I mean, it shouldn't be that easy to say no.
Yeah, and it's a good segue to what I'm going to ask next, which is about, I believe that our life is full of encounters and people who might have come to a part of your life and then it changes something. Then you think in another way and you say that that's brilliant. And so I was wondering if you had 2 or 3 people to think of, or maybe one to think of, who really came to a part of your life where it motivated you to think in an otherwise, or taught you a lesson that you're still teaching today as a teacher, maybe. Who would it be and why?
I have 2 people. I have so many people, but lately I want to say especially 2 people, and they're both blind. One is Ipek. She's at the age of 9. That Saturday 9 a.m. lessons for us, for my wife, and I'm a guest of that lesson that I listened to them. And also our tour guide in the Dialogue in the Dark Museum. And he changed my life. I think so differently after him. And he is almost at a talent level of an opera singer. He has this baritone voice that is so colorful. I'm very sorry that I didn't meet with him earlier, but every time I talk with him, he makes me laugh. It's just incredible. Like, this guy looks at life in a very, very different way. And he says he became blind later on in his life because of the sickness. And he says before he was blind, he was so scared of flying. He says, now I don't see I can travel anywhere. He just makes everything so funny. And my way of looking at life has changed. My way of seeing things has changed. One day I said, he uses bus system in Istanbul, and it takes quite a while for him to go home. I said, can I drop you off? That day I had the car with me, and he said, okay. So we got out of the parking lot, and step by step, as if he drove this direction yesterday, he told me the directions to his house and how I can get out of that neighborhood and go on an interstate. And it was incredible. The memory that he has was just incredible. And when I'm sad and when I feel hopeless, I think of him. I call him, text him, and life changes in that minute. So my goal is our son should look at things differently at all times, and he should change his opinion at all times, because opinions can be updated and they shouldn't stay still. So yeah, I have two people like that, and one is a young little pianist and the other one is a tour guide, and they changed my life. I look at life differently. Actually, I want to say another one too. Yeah, an autistic kid. When he came to us, he was unable to actually hold his legs. His legs would always touch the piano and it would hit the piano. For about 2 years, I held his legs in order to teach him a note. Now he's entering international piano competitions. He learned and changed, transformed his life with the help of his family, especially mom and dad. And I'm going to have dinner with him this Friday. And he is, when I want to ask anything about Mozart, I ask him, because he is this Mozart library in his mind. And it is so interesting. And yeah, he also changed the way I looked at autistic kids. Now I think autism is such a talent, because he has a perfect pitch that I cannot imagine. Like, he can tell you the note of a vacuum cleaner. And it's incredible. Now he's a conservatory student. He's still our student, and we are just enjoying listening to him at a concert on stage. So yeah, 3 people like that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all these
Please.
stories with us. And yeah, I wish you a lot of success with your project,
you.
which
Thank
really looks
you.
amazing.
Thank you.
And yeah, have a great day. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna talk to each other.
Thank you very much for doing this, Diane. And I'm very happy to be a guest of your podcast. And that was lovely. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.